Hi, so today we're going to talk about the different types of policy analysis. So, types of analysis. And we're going to take some notes on three different types: scientific, professional, and political. And first, I want to talk about the objectives of each. So, when we say types of policy analysis, what I mean is the different orientations of policy analysis. Like where are you coming at policy analysis from? What perspective are you coming from? So there's a scientific approach, there's a professional approach, there's a political approach, and each of these approaches has different objectives. The objective of the scientific approach is a search for truth. Building theory, search for truth and building theory uh, in a way that's going to help us learn about the effects of policy and the policy process. So it's building knowledge. Scientific objectives for policy analysis is really the objective is to build knowledge, find some kind of truth in the policy process. Um, with professional, the objective is to analyze policy alternatives for solving a public policy problem. So they want to analyze alternatives and find solutions. And when it comes to political policy analysis, uh, this approach is focused on advocating for a preferred policy. So, advocating for preferred policy. So you'll notice the stark differences between these. So scientific approach, you're looking for truth, you're looking to build theory, you're looking to build knowledge, and the policy outcomes or solutions, actually solving the problem, is kind of secondary. Uh, Professional approach is looking to analyze alternatives, try to do so objectively, and come up with solutions to policy problems. The political approach, you start with the policy you want and you advocate for that policy. So, so you're building evidence for a policy you already support because this is political. And we'll talk about what kind of groups do political, what kind of groups do professional, and what kind of groups do uh, scientific. So they have different. These all have different approaches. I'm going to highlight a few here. So in the scientific approach, they try to use the scientific method, and test hypotheses. And in doing so, there's less importance for policy relevance and more for building knowledge and trying to do so objectively. Does that mean that all people who use the scientific approach are perfectly objective? No, of course not. But the goal is to collect appropriate data, test hypotheses, use the scientific method, find some truth, and build theory about the policy process, about policy alternatives, about public policy. And coming up with solutions is secondary, but there is an attempt to be objective. Professionals synthesize research and theory to understand the consequences of policy alternatives, and really the focus is on evaluating current programs. Evaluate programs and contribute to debate. And so when you're evaluating programs, contributing to debate, there's some expectation that you're going to try to maintain objectivity, but really they are looking for solutions and contributing to the discussion for policy solutions. Political, this often comes from an ideological approach. So this is very ideological and sometimes partisan. And there's no real expectation for objectivity. There's no expectation from the political side that that you're collecting data and testing hypotheses and trying to build knowledge or come up with genuine solutions. You're building an argument for a policy you already prefer. And there's value to all three of these approaches. So let's talk about some of the limitations of these approaches, and then I'll give you some examples of who uses these approaches. So the limitation to the scientific approach is that this may be so theoretical and so full of jargon that it really doesn't contribute to solving any policy problems. That it builds knowledge that we talk about in class, but it doesn't really help solve our societal ills. So think about the different theories that we have discussed to this point. Think about policy diffusion. That's a great theory for understanding why states adopt policies, and it does help build knowledge, and we understand the policy process better. But does it really help us solve things like, poverty, or homelessness, or lack of health care, or whatever? Does it fix education in America? No, but it tells us about how states do decide to adopt policies. So this tends to lack real-world applicability at times, and that's not to say that it's not important, but it is harder to connect the dots to policy solutions. And this approach is usually the approach of academics, like myself. And again, it doesn't mean we're all really objective, but generally speaking, the policy solutions that may be seen in our work are far less ham-fisted than those from the political approach, where they're very blatant about what preferred policy um, they are advocating for. So this can sometimes be disconnected from the quote-unquote real world in ways. The professional approach is kind of trying to be in between the political and scientific approach, in that it's trying to be objective, it's trying to come up with genuine solutions, it's trying not to start with the position they want to advocate for, but it's also trying to have real-world applicability. So think tanks like the Brookings Institute, or so the Brookings Institution or the Urban Institute. Think tanks. Think about policy think tanks that analyze policy problems and come up with solutions. Now, one of the issues with this is that the time constraints for these groups to publish their findings may not be able to allow them to dig deep enough to come up with real, solid solutions or answers. They have also resource constraints, because these groups don't have a lot of rich resources to do their research. And then finally, there's the political. The political side has the downfall of lacking analytical depth and lacking objectivity, and at times being completely dismissed just because you're starting with the solution you want to advocate for. So people immediately see the bias. So when the National Education Association comes out and says they're against school vouchers or whatever, and they provide a policy brief about that, a lot of people are going to dismiss that because clearly the National Education Association has a position that they want to take, and they're going to build the evidence for that position. Same thing with the National Right to Work Foundation. When they put out something, they're not going to say unions are good. They're going to start from the position of unions have some kind of negative impact on society, and here's our policy brief on that. So the ideological position and the partisan nature of the political analysis sometimes gets dismissed. It sometimes lacks depth, and you're starting from a position. You're starting with your conclusion and then building your evidence instead of the other way around. So, I've already given some examples here, but, the National Education Association or pretty much any other labor union or ALEC on the more conservative side, these political groups will put out policy briefs and analyze policy from a political perspective. And so throughout the semester, we're reading work done by actually all three of these different groups. All right. Thank you.